Okay, today we have Monte A. Melnick, former tour manager of the Ramones for their entire career. Is that right? Were you the tour manager for almost their entire existence?
Yeah, well, I started off working at sound for them, and then I worked my way world manager, tour manager.
Wow. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, they played and you played along with them over 2,200 shows.
Well, their total shows that they did was 2,263 shows for their career. I was there for about over 2,200 of them, roughly, maybe a little more.
And this was across 22 years, right?
Yes, yes. And I list them all in the back of my book there, all the dates.
Yeah. And like I mentioned to you before, I mean, I finished your book On the Road with the Ramones. And I mean, it was total rock and roll. I mean, I can't think of another band in history that lived 22 years of pure rock, pure mayhem, played every city, every country, and turned into this iconic band. Right? They turned into this iconic band that, I mean, they were more popular after they kind of all passed. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. That's a sad part about that is that the four originals that were in the group, Johnny, Joey, Dee Dee, Tommy, are all passed away, and still a couple of them out there, Marky, CJ, Richie, but the four originals are passed away, which is really sad about that. And you're right, they are bigger than they were when they were around. Unfortunately, I mean, fortunately they're bigger, but the original people couldn't see this. I have a joke now I tell 1,000 billion times that if the Ramones were this big when I was working for them, I would have gotten a big raise. People say Ramones, Stones, Beatles, Ramones in the same sentence. I'm amazed. It's really, really great.
Now, how did you survive the whole ride?
Who says I survived?
Well, you're here.
Oh, yeah, you're right. How, I enjoyed what I was doing, Otherwise I wouldn't have stuck around for all those 20-something years, traveling, seeing the world, going to different cities, countries. But, I had to deal with the band and crew, too. So it's a big job. Tour manager, road managers, it's a big job. People don't realize it. That's why I try to put in my book what it's like. The people that are underneath the band too. I talk to a lot of crew and stuff like that, and I show, tour passes and itineraries and explain what it's like being a tour manager.
So, what was your favorite city that you ever visited when you were traveling with the band?
It's not a favorite city. I enjoyed Japan a lot because it was so different than everywhere else in the world. Basically, you go to Europe, kind of people look like you and your relatives running around, whatever. But Japan's just like totally different. The culture, the food, the way they look. I can always see Joey in the crowd because he was like a foot taller than everybody else. I could spot him right away. I just enjoyed that. I enjoyed going to Japan a lot.
Japan, and is it true? I mean, is there any place the band didn't go that they wish they did, or do they pretty much conquer the entire world at that point?
There was a lot of places that they didn't go to. Well, Russia was one, but they couldn't get into Russia with an album called Rocket to Russia. They were anti-communist at the time. India, China, stuff like that. I would like to gone there, but we never got around to those things. There's a lot of countries that we weren't in. We did play a lot of countries though.
Now, I mean, you're really considered the fifth Ramone.
Well, I got to put a damper on that. Actually, Marky's the fifth Ramone. And it goes up from there. Marky, Richie, CJ, blah, blah, blah. Maybe ninth or 10th Ramone, if you want to say that. But the fifth Ramone actually is Marky.
I get it. Yeah, because they had a couple of different members in the band. But okay, but still, I mean, it's been said that you were the guy that kind of, in a way, held the band together, solved feuds, and just kind of solved. I mean, right? There always needs to be someone around that band that kind of keeps the band together, right?
Well, that's a job. The tour manager, road manager, is to keep things glued together and be diplomatic about it. Not only had to deal with the crazy band, but crazy crews too. So double the amount of crazy people you have to deal with and juggle. You got to juggle and be diplomatic. And sure, you have to hold things together. Otherwise, things fall apart. And then where are you? You know.
Now, did you ever think that when you were tour managing the Ramones, that you'd be part of literally a revolution, a kind of part of rock and roll history?
No, you know, when you're working and you're doing things in those early years, you don't think about things like that. You're just doing your job, working, getting ready for the next tour, in the tour the next day, and et cetera, et cetera. You don't really say, "Hey, wow." You know, I knew working their way up from where they started to where they ended. I could see things were getting better and better and better, which was nice, you know. So I kind of understood that something was going on there that was really registering with people.
So you said you noticed that things were getting better, better, and better.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
As they got better and better and better too. I mean, if you look at some early shots of the Ramones and CBGBs, they were, they worked hard about to get to where they were. You know what I mean? They worked very hard. They rehearsed a lot. They started from scratch and they worked their way up.
now,
Didn't happen overnight.
no, definitely not. But the Ramones, right? And I never thought about this, but they had the songs, the attitude, and the look. I mean, they had it, right? I mean, the jeans, the hair, the logo, everything just kind of fit perfectly. Now, was this something that evolved over time, or was this something that like there was a lot of strategizing about?
No, it evolved over time. The Ramones came from where the glam rock period was kind of phasing out. Now, if you look at some early shots of the Ramones, they were wearing like a leopard shirt and a silk pants, and they were kind of phasing in from glam rock. I guess they like the dolls and stuff like that, but they realized it's too expensive for the clothes of those days. Granny Takes a Trip and all those crazy stores. So you buy these clothes. It was too expensive. They said, we're not going to buy these clothes anymore. We'll just wear what we wear in the street, which is jeans and leather jackets. And the jeans were ripped because they were old. When I was growing up, I had a rip in my jeans. I put a patch in it. They didn't do that. They just left it like that. They said, okay, this is the way we're going to be. It evolved. It took a little time, like a year or so, between the glam rock and the punk rock period to get the whole look together.
So basically, what you're saying is the band didn't have a lot of money to buy the expensive clothes, so they kind of dressed down, very minimalistic, if really pretty much what they could afford.
Just what they were wearing in the street, basically.
Now, this was contrary to what other kind of acts doing at their time, right? Because you had, as you mentioned, you had the New York Dolls and all those other kind of glam, kind of even Kiss at that point, right? Were kind of
yeah.
just.
Yeah, sure. Slade, Kiss, Dolls. So it was glam rock period. That Bowie, and they like these groups, and they try to, and in the beginning, they kind of like look a little bit like them, but it didn't work out well because they couldn't afford all those clothing, and they figured that they look better with the street clothes.
Now, when the Ramones were getting popularity, in their area in New York, their influences at the time, like those glam rockers, did they actually embrace the Ramones? Did they like them, or were they kind of outcasted by those acts?
Well, a lot of people in the early years, CBGBs were other bands watching other bands. That was the only people in the place. So they got friendly with all those people in the groups, They went to see the other groups, and the other groups come to see them. It was a friendly atmosphere, basically.
It was a friendly atmosphere.
Yeah, because as I said, the early years of CBs, the only people in the audience was other groups watching other groups, basically, in the early years.
Now, despite their huge cult following, they never achieved mainstream success. And it's ironic, right? Because how many songs can I listen to the average person? They would be like, well, what do you mean they had never achieved mainstream success? I know all their songs. I go to clubs. I hear cover bands perform. I want to be sedated. But the truth is, right, that they never achieved this mainstream success, never had number one songs.
Until after they retired and they passed away, most of them. Yeah, that's basically because of the U.S. radio wouldn't play them. We couldn't get on U.S. stations here, and we couldn't, so people in the early years, people didn't know what the Ramones were about.
But what's funny is probably when the Ramones were around, everyone wanted to be on the radio. But like today, now it's cool if you're not on the radio.
The internet taken over now. So it's a whole different world now with the internet.
Do you think the Ramones could embrace this new world if they were in it? Like, do you think it was their personality, or would they be doing different things?
Well, they would embrace it. They were always looking for different things to get on the mainstream. That's why they kept on changing producers over the years. They just wanted to get that hit. Phil Spector, John Dubois, Graham Gulman. They kept on going, like, of course, Tommy and Ed Stasium did a great job in the beginning, and Craig Leon and all that. But they wanted to, but they couldn't get on the radio, So they said, well, let's try different producers. And that's why they went through all these different producers over the years to try to get on the radio, which the radio just wouldn't play them. I think the Sex Pistols poisoned the whole atmosphere here in the States, basically. Because the radio station said, oh, like the Sex Pistols do idiotic things in the station, and they'll spit and they'll curse and they'll throw up, and the Ramones are the same thing. They didn't realize it wasn't the same thing. But they got, it hurt the Ramones, basically.
Wow, I never thought about that. So the Sex Pistols were the ones that prevented the Ramones from achieving mainstream success.
And in the States, yeah.
In the States. Wow.
That's my view of it.
Well, that's a pretty plausible explanation.
I mean, because in the early years, all these kids would listen to the Ramones. And then in the later years, after they retired and passed away, all these kids grew up and got into positions where they could put the Ramones at the soundtracks, movie soundtracks, put the Ramones at their commercials, which they couldn't get before that, TV commercials, soundtracks, more people in the radio station. The kids grew up and they were in the radio station and started playing the Ramones more. That's why the Ramones got bigger, 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 because all these kids who were listening to them grew up and started putting them on all these different medias,
So would you say that the Sex Pistols kind of spoiling it for them and everybody else, do you think it was a bad move for them? I mean, do you like, hey, they should have toned it down?
What? Bad move for who?
Well, everybody. Like, I mean, the Sex Pistols, kind of what you mentioned about going on the radio stations, throwing up, spitting. Like, do you think they should have toned it down?
Well, that was them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They weren't going to tone anything down. They wanted to be that way, and that's the way they were. They worked at that.
Right, but totally, you're right. But at the same time, kind of being themselves, but in the chopping themselves off from any kind of mainstream success, future opportunity. But like you said, the Ramones were different because unlike the Sex Pistols, they did want to embrace the mainstream, and as you said, that's why Joey Ramone wanted to work with like a producer like Phil Spector. But he was a crazy guy, wasn't he?
That's one word for him. Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, we big Phil Spector fans. We were really appreciated what he did over the years. He was a genius in his producing. But we didn't realize meeting him, he came back in 1977. We played the Whiskey A Go-Go in L.A. And he came backstage. He said, I want to work with you guys. And back then, there's a picture of him in the book. He was wearing a cape and he looked like the devil, but he has bodyguards and he had guns on. But he said he came back actually after the show and said, I want to work with you guys. So finally Seymour Stein got him to produce the album. We didn't know how, I mean, just looking at him at that time, we should have gotten some sort of hint of what he was really like, But working with him was difficult. It was very difficult.
Did you have any confrontations with Phil?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was there the whole time. And he had guns on him, and he was very quirky. He didn't like people in the studio. He wouldn't let people like Alan Arkish, the director of Rock and Roll High School, came by once. He kicked them out of the studio. And he had his ways of producing, the songs. He'd make Johnny play things over and over and over again, and it was driving Johnny crazy. And one time we were going to leave the studio, and he came up to me and said, "You rush, give me the keys. You're not leaving, because I was driving the van at the time. He was quite a character, let me tell you. We were up at his house a couple of times. To get in and out of his house, you had to be let in and out with a key. You couldn't just walk in and walk out. He kept us hostage up there for hours watching some crazy horror movie at one time. He was a quirky guy, and he saw what happened to him, unfortunately.
Now, do you think he was crazy, or like always crazy, or do you think he
I think
lost his mind over time?
I think he was always pretty much eccentric. Let's put it that way. In a way that people would see things that would say were crazy, but he has ways of doing things, and he liked his guns too, and
So
his bodyguards.
So he was eccentric, dangerous.
Yeah, you saw what happened. He got put away for supposedly killing that woman.
Now,
John Lennon, he shot off his gun in the studio. He never pointed the gun at us or anything, but he had it. He took it out and put it on the console once. You can see it at his ankle holster and stuff like that.
but he ended up producing one of the Ramones album, though, right? Which album was that he produced?
End of the century.
Right. Okay. And it did pretty well, right?
Yeah, I think that was one of the bigger selling albums.
And who was it? Was it Johnny that did not like it?
I think Johnny and Dee Dee didn't care for it too much. Marky and Joey liked it.
And was it because of, what do you think divided the band over that album? Was it the songs or just kind of the production?
Probably the overproduction of it, because they were used to just minimal type of production, And he was putting violins on and stuff like that, which is, all right, basically. But they don't, Johnny wanted to get back to the basic punk rock stuff,
Now, as a tour manager, did he ever have any input with the creative aspect of the band?
No, no. I mean, I would just basically, I went with them. Well, they kept me around, which was lucky. Usually a tour manager goes out on tour, comes back, then it's got to look for another band. But they kept me around for the whole thing because I was working with them on the videos and during the movie and getting rehearsals together. They rehearsed a lot. After they would do a tour for a month or so, come back and rehearse for a couple of weeks, go back on tour. So I was always involved in getting things together. So they kept me around for the whole business, on salary, which is nice.
But they also must have got along with you, obviously, as well.
Yeah, they had to.
You're there every day.
Except talking about End of the Century album, people come up to me and ask me, what's your favorite Ramones song? I like a lot of Ramones songs, but I do have a favorite Ramones song. It's on the album End of the Century. Are you familiar with the songs on End of the Century?
Yeah.
Would you know which song I would be my favorite song on that album?
Can I guess?
Yeah, guess. Go ahead.
All right, let me see. Let me do a little guessing.
We'll Google it.
Well, I'm just going to get all the songs. I can't write off all the songs in my head, but I'm going to. I'm going to guess your favorite song. Okay. I am going to guess your favorite song. All right, here we go.
It's going to be hard with the title, basically.
All right. So, all right. All right. Do
I
you
know.
remember rock and roll radio? No. I'm affected. No. Danny says no. Chinese rock, no. The Return of Jack and Judy, no. Let's go. That's too. Baby, I love you. The Phil Spector song. Um, I would say, this ain't Havana
No, keep on going.
all the way.
There you go.
Okay, close.
You know why?
Why?
Joey wrote me into the song.
Really?
Monte's driving me crazy. It's just like being in the Navy. So you asked me what they felt about me. That's how Joey felt. I was driving him crazy.
Were you? Did you spend time in the Navy?
No,
Okay.
but he thought that I'm driving him crazy, like being in he kind of rhymed it.
Sure. Now,
And also the cover of that album, they didn't like because that was the first cover or the only cover they ever had that they weren't wearing leather jackets on.
oh, that's right.
So two of them liked it, two of them didn't like it. But that was a Mick Rock, by the way, the famous Mick Rock photographer did the cover for that. And on the inside sleeve or he did to shoot one shot with them with leather jackets. Spencer Drake is a designer for that album. He put them in the inner sleeve or single or something like that with the leather jackets. But the cover they didn't like. Well, Johnny and Dee Dee didn't like it.
Now you know what's amazing is reading that book, and I know most artists argue don't get along for the most part, but what's interesting with the Ramones is that it seemed like they, when they got on stage, they put on a great act, but when they were off stage, they were like this dysfunctional marriage. But what's interesting is that it was their dysfunction that may have kept the band together, because it was like, listen, nothing personal. I don't like you. You don't like me. This is a personal relationship. We're a popular band, iconic band. Let's keep it going. Is that a right description?
Yeah. Dysfunction sounds like a School of Rock song. Dysfunction Junction.
Dysfunction Junction.
Maybe it was conjunction.
Right.
Anyhow, well, there's a reason for that. I mean, how many marriages last 20-something years between Johnny and Joey?
Right. I mean, marriages don't last like more than 5 years today, but yeah.
So what they realized was basically, the later years, I mean, they're friends in the beginning because they started the group together. It's just the thing with Linda and all that kind of put a wedge between them. But they realized that why fight? Why, get into a fist fight or whatever over that? And they realized the music was more important. They were putting out good music. They got on stage. The fans were there. It's like getting on stage. There's 30,000 people, and they're feeding back. And holy mackerel, that's a high. Do you play an instrument, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's like when you go on stage and you're playing great, you're getting high because if you're doing it well, the audience is feeding back, and you're getting high off of it. That's why a lot of people, groups, when they come off stage, they want to continue the high. They keep on drinking and doing drugs to continue that high going. That's a problem. But they realize, why break up? Just don't have minimal after the shows. Don't have a lot of contact, or don't hang out with them after, when they come off tours and stuff like that. They kept them to a minimum, and that's why they stayed together for all those years. They realized the bigger thing. It's kind of like a marriage. The kids. Keep the kids happy, stay in the marriage. You know what I mean? So that's why the music was more important.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because today the new bands today, they can't survive 22 years of marriage. I mean, they can't even survive 6 months of marriage.
I don't know, but they're really not getting the benefit of what they're doing. Going on stage, putting out great new songs, having people enjoy the music, going on stage, crowds feeding back and all that. It's there, So, people don't get along. They don't get along. But they managed that. They managed to do that all those years. They came with that compromise.
Now, for the most part, right? I mean, Johnny and Joey, they didn't speak really for the 22-year history, right?
Yeah. I got a little overblown, basically. I had to talk to each other.
Right.
I mean,
Sure.
they
Sure.
just kept it to a minimum. Here's the
Right.
set. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to record. Here's some songs, blah, blah, in the studio, blah, blah, blah. It's just they kept it to a minimum. They didn't hang out after the show. They didn't go socialize. It was just a business. Keep it together. Going to go on stage. Then they were cooking on stage. They knew they were fine together on stage. So they realized that was the best thing to do. Keep it together.
So it seems like, though, what was really cool is that the band was kind of shunned by the mainstream media. But during the 90s, later 90s, you had the new bands that came on the scene, like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana. And they were more kind of those punkish kind of bands that honored their roots, like Pearl Jam honored Neil Young. And they started bringing back bands that people may have missed over, right? So Eddie Vedder was a big fan of the Ramones, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's what happened. In the early years, the Ramones went out, played all over the place, the country, all the world. All these kids saw them and said, hey, they're not doing anything unbelievable. You don't have to be Eric Clapton on the guitar or drum solos and stuff like that. And they realized there's something there. We could do the same thing. And all these groups formed after the Ramones left the different cities and the countries over the around the world and the country in the United States. Pearl Jam was one of them. Eddie Vedder was a huge Ramones fan. He hung out with the Ramones later on in the 90s. Metallica, Soundgarden. When we played Lollapalooza, 96, finally they got us on Lollapalooza. It was Metallica, Soundgarden, Rancid, Ramones. So I put the Ramones on stage, and I'm standing there. All these other groups came out. They were standing on the side of the stage. They're huge fans because they grew up with the Ramones. They realized, and they went and they became friends with the Ramones. They said, we were kids when we saw you guys, and we formed the groups because of you guys. It's amazing. I mean, U2. They wrote the song "The Miracle of Joey Ramone" on their album. Bono's a huge Ramones fan. That's amazing. All these groups. That's the legacy of the Ramones, basically. It's kind of like Johnny Appleseed. He planted apples all over the place. The Ramones went out and showed kids that they can do the same thing. It wasn't that difficult if you had a good song and you played confidently.
And they were nominated, right? They're inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What year was that? 2001 or 2?
2.
Did you go to that?
Yeah, that was like my gold watch. They bought a ticket for me. I was there for the whole thing. Unfortunately, Joey had passed away, which is a sad thing. Also, Green Day's a huge Ramones fans. They were big Ramones fans. So usually at the ceremony, the band goes up and plays songs, but Johnny didn't want to play without Joey there. So Green Day actually went up on stage during the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and played all the Ramones songs that day. They were huge Ramones fans. Billy Joe Armstrong's a big Ramones fan.
So in that band, like, who was the main creative force?
Well, over the years, I mean, in the beginning, they were all a great creative force. Tommy was the architect of the Ramones, basically. I mean, he first came in, basically, he just wanted to produce them and manage them. And they were a 3-piece group when they brought them into Performance Studios. I read the whole thing in my book about Performance Studios there. I got involved with Tommy. We built the place, managed the place, and got time for our own groups there. He brought in the Ramones as a 3-piece group. Joey was on drums, Dee singing, and Johnny on guitar. He just wanted to produce them. So he said basically Tommy was the architect, and he pulled Joey up the drums. Dee was having a hard time singing, and he heard Joey had a good voice and pulled Joey up the drums, and then they started looking at the drummers. Nobody could understand what they were doing in the beginning. Tommy said, okay, here's play. Like, he was a guitar player. He wasn't a drummer, but he's a great musician. He sat in and tried to show these drummers what to do, but they were so raw in the beginning, nobody could understand. So he joined the group. And, Johnny, Joey, Dee and Tommy were the main songwriters at the time. Johnny pitched it a lot, too, but they were the main songwriters in the beginning of the group. It's a long story there, so I just abbreviated it a little bit.
Yeah, and no, totally. So now another thing, when Joey passed, I mean, a lot of things were revealed, like kind of what he was dealing with. Like, I mean, right, he had this rare disease called, what is that disease called?
OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right. Now, usually like OCD is something where you wash your hands a lot, you want to make sure. Was he a germ freak?
Not a germ freak, but like to do things over and over again. In the beginning, early years, nobody knew what it was. They hadn't diagnosed that particular thing, so everybody thought, why are you doing this? You're crazy. Don't stop doing it. He, like, go off the sidewalk, come back and forth on the sidewalk, or open and close the door a million times. Not necessarily washing his hands, because I wasn't in the bathroom all the time watching him. Wash his hands. But he did things over and over again. And later on, they found out it was a chemical imbalance, and he took some drugs for it. It helped him a bit, but he still had it over the years. It was driving the group crazy, and me too, because it was hard to get him in and out of hotels and out of his home. And it was difficult.
Because he would do things over and over.
Yeah, yeah. He wouldn't come down. I have to tell him like the wrong time. It was like an hour difference in time. He didn't look at the clock, so I said, "Look, I'm coming at a certain time, or like an hour early, just to get him ready and stuff like that."
Now, when he passed away, I mean, I remember that, by the way. I mean, that kind of rocked the world. I mean, how did you take that all in during that day?
It was horrible. I mean, he had lymphoma, cancer, so that was what he passed away with, unfortunately. What happened was, I think it was the middle of winter, New Year's Eve. He went out of his house and slipped and broke his hip, and he was on medication for the lymphoma, but he broke his hip. They had to take him off the medication to fix the hip. As soon as they took him off the medication, it got worse. He was doing okay under the medication for the lymphoma, but they had to take him off it. It got worse and worse, and he passed away. Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, you don't want to see somebody you work with all those years pass away like that,
No.
Like with the rest of them, Johnny had prostate cancer. Tommy had bile duct cancer.
And they were all like,
Dee Dee died the rock and roll life. He OD'd, unfortunately. I thought when he left the group initially, that he would be the first one to do a stupid thing. But he actually kept straight for a long, long time. I was amazed, But he had that last thing in the later years. That did him in, unfortunately.
But prostate cancer is easily treatable today,
That's
right?
the thing. Well, here's the thing. Go to the doctor once or twice a year. Get tested. Johnny, he was, he eat good, I exercise, but you would go to the doctor enough. By the time he went there and the diagnosis was too far along, and he fought it for a couple of years, and it was too late. So go to the doctor, get the test. It can be easily cured.
Yeah, because I mean, right? I mean, you always hear like a family member constantly being diagnosed with prostate cancer, but as you said, rarely is it fatal. As you said, if they treat it in time. Now, so all the Ramones, well, not all the Ramones, but all the original members have passed. But what's amazing though is the timing of the passing. Like 49, 50s. I mean, they all passed away right in the 50-ish range.
Yeah. I don't know what that's from, or why that particular.
But isn't that kind of odd?
Yeah, true. Also, there's a lot of people. Rock stars died 27. If you look over the.
True.
So it's, I don't know. You can look and read into what you want as far as the age goes. I'm just going back in the beginning. That Dee Dee was a huge creative person and songwriter for the band too. So, over the years. So when he left and CJ came in, he continued writing for the band, which is the great thing about that whole thing. Sorry to divert.
Now, I remember, I think I was definitely in high school when Pet Sematary came out. Stephen King's Pet Sematary. And I remember watching the movie and the song came at the end, and I'm like, wow, this is a really great Ramones song. It's the first time I ever heard. Like I didn't hear the song before. I just heard it like after I watched the movie. And Stephen King got a hold of the band, right? Even he was a big fan of the Ramones.
Yes, he actually wrote bits and pieces of the Ramones into some of his books. It was like somebody's listening to a Ramones song, blah, blah, blah. He was a huge Ramones fan, and so he wanted to have the Ramones play up in Bangor. So he brought us up there, the big civic center, and headline of the show was Cheap Trick and the Ramones. So after the show, he invites the Ramones back to dinner and to his house. Not Cheap Trick. They were really pissed off about that whole thing, you know. So we went back to his house, some Victorian mansion up in the woods there. He sat down and said, "Look, I like to listen to like hard, fast music like you guys and write my books like that, you know. So that's why he loved the Ramones." And he at that time he said, "I'm doing Pet Sematary. Write a song." Dee Dee came up with that Pet Sematary song, which is great. It's a great song.
Now, were you in Stephen King's house?
Yeah, I went with them.
So what was Stephen King like?
He's great. I mean, he's like really intense. You can tell how he wrote his book. Very intense type of guy.
Mhm.
As I said, he said, I like to listen to like hard, loud music like you guys and to write when I'm listening to the music. Really nice guy. Really, really good, really nice person.
Now, was his house creepy?
Yeah. It's like a Victorian mansion up in the woods there, you know.
Were you So you were creeped out when you're in
Yeah,
the house?
the gate in the front of his house had like bats on it and stuff like that. Oh,
Wow.
It was the, yeah. I mean, once you got inside, it was, you know, you could see how he wrote in his office and stuff like that. He was a very friendly guy. Very friendly guy.
Did you stay overnight?
At his house? No.
Yeah. Would you?
I don't know if he had enough rooms for everybody, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I would stay over his house overnight. It's kind of creepy. I mean,
Yeah.
again, his books are crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So now, and he also wrote the song "Poison Heart" was that the sequel of Pet Sematary?
Not sure about that one.
Yeah, remember Poison Heart? Like,
I
wasn't
remember
that
this song with it. I'm not sure. You got me on that one.
okay? All right, I remember that too. I thought that was a sequel, but something that he didn't write, but they seemed to do another song. Now, I mean, listen, it seemed like that to sum up the Ramones over the course of 22 years, they rocked hard, fast, and left. Is that right?
Say that again?
They rocked hard and fast and left.
Left. It took a while to leave.
It was a lot to leave.
And a
But
while,
I think
a long
left.
time.
Yeah, they rock hard, fast, and left. But I think that there wasn't this big goodbye. Like artists, that before they leave, they do like 20,
Farewell tours.
Exactly.
Well, there's a couple times that Ramones said they were going to end it. Johnny he moved to LA and he wanted to end on a high note, basically. He didn't want to drag it out too much. And they finally got Lollapalooza, which happened to end in LA. Johnny was there. And so the last show, a lot of people came on stage and played with them. Rancid. Eddie Vedder came up and sang a song, and Soundgarden guy came up, and
Chris Cornell.
Lemmy was there, and he played that great song Lemmy wrote. Was terrific.
Wow, that must have been a crazy jam between everybody.
Yeah, well, they came up individually, different songs.
Sure.
And you're familiar with this song Lemmy wrote? It was Ramones.
Yes.
Amazing song. He came up and sang it, alongside CJ and stuff like that. That was the last show they ever did. It was kind of sad. And I didn't, a couple of times before that, they said this is going to be the last tour, this is going to be the last tour. They finally got Lollapalooza offered. They did that. So, I thought they would probably get back together again, but it never happened.
But after their final show, which was where?
96. in LA.
in LA.
Yeah.
What venue was that?
You know, the Palace,
Mhm. Palace.
the theater.
So during that time, there was like no big goodbye, right? It was just like after that show, it was like,
John left right away. Joey hung out with Lemmy, and TJ hung out. And Dee Dee came. Actually, Dee Dee came up and sang a song, and he forgot the words and stuff. It was like,
so the last show was kind of very anticlimactic,
yes,
right? For a band
absolutely.
that's been there for 22 years.
Yes, it was. Yes,
Is that
it was.
because, and then why do you think that after 22 years?
Well, they, as I said, they after shows they didn't hang out together, you know. And Johnny lived there, so he just ended the show and went home in LA. Joey hung out for a while with everybody and stuff like that.
But normally when someone's been, when,
There's nothing normal about the Ramones.
yeah, right. It's not like, you're working for a company for 22 years and you have a going away party for you.
Yeah, there was no cake.
No
Stuff
cake,
like
no cake. And that's what I really find, and that's what I love about just music and the performers and the artists, is because, as you said, there's nothing normal. I mean, typically someone will work at a company for 22 years. As you said, there's an event. Hey, there's a cake, a
gold
dinner,
watch or something.
Right. But they're like all this work for 22 years, all the blood, sweat, tears, video shows, everything. Last show, no handshake. See you later.
Yeah, well, it's Johnny basically, He just wanted to get out of there. It was a business with him,
And how about
after every show, he'd write down how much we made, how many people were there, and he had a little book. He kept diary, and then I also kept a diary with every show, calendar. So that's why in the back of my book we list every single show that they ever played in the back of the book, because I had my calendars, and he did also had his calendars and stuff. So we knew exactly where we were at what time,
And how did you feel during the last show? Like, what was going through your head?
It was sad, I didn't think they would totally end. I figured, maybe down the line they'd get back together. But, Joey wasn't feeling that great, and he needed a long rest. And Johnny said, this is it. He wanted to end on the high point. And, Noaki would have gone on, and CJ, of course, they would have both continued as much as they could,
What year was that? 96?
Yes.
Wow. So can you, is there anything you can share with me that nobody knows about the Ramones?
That's very difficult.
Or is everything out there?
Pretty much. I've done a million podcasts and lectures and stuff like that, and put in a book and stuff like that. So, and there's so many different websites and Ramones sites that dug up things, that everything's pretty much out there. I really don't know where to say.
So they pretty much, they laid their souls on the line. Everything's been said. Nothing's been unsaid about the Ramones, which is, by the way, kind of cool, because that's kind of what they were about, right? They were never about fakery or trickery. I mean, they just kind of laid their souls on the line, right?
Yeah, they put it out there. They all put it out there. They didn't want to hide anything. So people realized that, and that's what they appreciated about the band.
Now, after the last show with the Ramones, they broke up, and you still tour managed, right? You still kind of work with some other artists.
I worked a little with Degeneration and Ronnie Spector. Did one thing with Full Winter. Oh yeah, a little bit. I did a little bit of stuff after that.
And so okay. And how old were you then? Were you how old were you when you kind of kiboshed the whole tour managing with artists?
I think 20,
Well, here's my thing. My thing is, so what did you do afterwards? Did you transition into something else?
Well, yeah. As I said, I got a couple other groups I started working with, and uh, for a year or two, and then I got a nice job at the New York Hall of Science as the audiovisual supervisor in Queens, Forest Hills. Not Forest Hills, Corona. So I was over there for about 16 and a half years after. I did a few jobs, tour managing other bands a little bit briefly, and then I transitioned into as an audiovisual supervisor over at the New York Hall of Science for about 16 and a half years. And then after that, right now, I'm doing some part-time work at the Queens Theater in the Corona. You know where the Men in Black Towers are? The
Yeah,
park?
yeah.
There's a theater over there. I do some part-time work there in house management. So I transitioned over from touring into other things, basically.
So do you like where you're at right now?
Well, the whole thing with the pandemic and all that kind of put a, the theaters closed down for a long time. It was like rough there for a couple of years. They're gradually getting back, and yeah, that's okay. I mean, I don't know if I could handle going on the road again. That's stressful.
Have you thought about it though? I mean, where you're like, maybe I would love going on the road. Like, have you thought about it?
I think about it, but then I think about how stressful it is. It's a lot of work. People don't realize that road managing, tour managing, there's lots of things going on. As I said before, you're dealing with a band, crazy band and a crazy crew, which is doubles the amount of nutty people that are around you. And there's a lot of things: equipment, transportation, hotels, venues, promoters, fans, press agents, record companies. It's a big thing. That's why I wrote in my book a lot what it's like to be a tour manager. Put a lot of information in there. If you notice, like rooming lists and riders and stuff like that.
But the biggest thing is like the lack of sleep.
You get used to that. If you're a younger person, you can handle all that stuff.
But to me, when I was, I don't know, maybe 18, you're familiar with the PNC Bank Art Center, right?
Yes.
So what I did is during college, I would work. By the way, did the Ramones ever play the PNC before?
No.
No. All right. So I was a hired stagehand, and I worked during the summers during college. And for instance, I remember like Aerosmith would roll in, and I'd have to be there at like 5 a.m. and set up the show, which would probably, now not all shows, but some of the bigger ones, you may not get out until like 4 o'clock. So 5 a.m. to 4 o'clock, and then you had to be back at, I don't know, like 10 o'clock, and then rip the show down, which could be like 2 o'clock. You're going home at 2 o'clock, 2:30, and then you got to wake up the next day.
Well, that's I was lucky enough to, you work your way up. In the beginning, we didn't have huge Aerosmith equipment and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, I mean, in the early years, I was doing everything pretty much, driving and setting up equipment and doing the sound. The bigger they got, the more people we hire, drum roadies, guitar roadies, crew. So I worked my way up to road manager, then tour manager, which I travel with the band, which is the nice part about it. I didn't have to go with the crew. So the crew had to get there early. The crew had to stay late. I just came in with the band, do the sound check, went back to the hotel, blah, blah, coordinate things, put the band back, on stage, blah, blah, pick up the money, then leave, and then the crew would stay there and break down. So luckily, that's why I worked my way up to the tour managing business there, which is much easier than being a regular crew,
Because the crew never sleeps.
Yes, the crew never sleeps. Tour manager gets to sleep with the band.
Now, And basically, I mean, being the tour manager, I would say generally, I mean, a tour manager to me is a manager. Because I understand the manager deals with the creative aspect, right? Supposedly the creative aspect, but I mean, I think in today, many artists end up hiring their tour manager and replacing the original manager.
Well, yeah, you could transition to that, but they had like a powerful manager at the end there, Derek Herfer. So, the manager deals with dealing with the record company directly and with albums and selling songs or whatever. And it's a whole different aspect of what the manager actually does, getting good booking agents and press, dealing with press people, getting press people and stuff like that. It's a whole different thing. Actually, let's go back what I did after. I forgot. After Ramones retired in '96, Marky Ramone approached me and said, "Look, I want you to manage me." So I actually managed Marky Ramone and Marky Ramone and Intruders, and I got a deal for 2 records and put him out on the road with another tour manager. So I actually did manage it for a little bit. It's a whole another world being a manager.
So did he release something during the time you were managing him?
Yeah, yes, 2 albums came out.
So
and the Intruders.
Okay, so were you dealing with the label?
Yeah, I got them the deal. I got them the deal. I got them the booking agents, put them on the road, and then put them out with another crew. I didn't go on the road. I stayed back being the manager, dealing with that, which was different. And it was okay, but it didn't really click well with me. So I was there for about a year and a half. We parted amicably, and he went on. Got other managers. Now he's basically Marky Ramone. He does mostly Ramone songs.
So I am going to kind of sum this up with the Ramones. Well, first of all, I think that you lived a lifestyle that a lot of people wish they had, like on the road, traveling countries and doing all this stuff. But a lot of people don't realize, like, it's a hard lifestyle. I mean, it's a real job, hard lifestyle. And, but it's rewarding because the fact that you can go to sleep at night knowing that I did a lot of things a normal person would not do. Right. I mean,
yeah. You get to travel the world and see a lot of things. It was just amazing. You just got to get used to traveling a lot, living out of a suitcase. Also, people, like, relationships, girlfriends would go say, "Hey, you're there partying." People go to a show, they watch the band on stage and have a drink. Me, I kind of explain, I'm not there to party. I'm there working. It's a hard job. A lot of girlfriends would say, "Hey, well, you're partying, you're having a great time." It was rough, kind of maintaining a good relationship. That was the down part about touring a lot.
Yeah, and that the fact that you missed holidays. I mean, when you're touring, the problem is it's like you love touring, but then as you're touring, you feel like you're missing out on other things sometimes.
Yeah, family life, basically.
Family life. Now, during that time, I'm not sure your personal life, but during that time, did you have any children at all?
I had a stepchild, a goddaughter over the years and stuff like that.
Okay.
But as I said, it was hard because all these women I meet, you got to take me on tour. You're going here. Why don't you take me? I couldn't. The Ramones are not a huge group they could afford to take along my, spouse or not my girlfriend or whatever. And they didn't understand that, So it was really hard because when they did go on shows, they said, "Hey, it's a party. Everybody's drinking, having a good time." I said, "No, I'm working. It's not a party, basically." So it was hard for them to understand that. That was the rough part of that.
Now, did you remember actually the show that I attended? The Ramones show was in New Jersey, in
Capitol Theater,
Seabright.
where is it? Was it a small club or something?
Yeah, Trade Winds.
I think I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Did they have tables and people eating food and stuff?
No.
No?
Maybe back, maybe, but not in the main thing. But it was crazy. Let me see if I can say the date. The Ramones, Trade Winds, New Jersey. Just someone look stuff up. Trade Winds, New Jersey. Let me see when they played. Oh, September 23rd, 1993.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. There's so many places they played.
Well, that was part of their 2,000 plus shows. But you know what? It was crazy. Like, I remember I really didn't know what to expect out of a Ramones show.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't expecting to see craziness. I didn't know if it was just happened to be that night, that venue, or was it always crazy like that?
Well, what do you say? What made you say crazy?
Well.
The mosh pits and the
Yeah, the pits and
the
the pits, and ironically, I think that might have been just that place, but I can remember like a lot of fights. Well, I shouldn't say fights. All I know is the bouncers were constantly throwing people out of that show.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. In the early years when they first started playing in clubs, managers or club owners would come over to me, club managers and owners, and they didn't understand what was going on because they never saw like mosh pits and people jumping around and jumping off the stage. That's why we had to, after a number of shows, we said nobody gets on stage. Johnny didn't want anybody getting on stage, so we had to have good barriers. But at times, club owners would come over to me and say, "What's going on? There's a riot going on." And to the audience, I said, "No, that's they're having fun." The mosh pits and slam dancing and stage surf, crowd surfing, all that stuff. In the beginning, they didn't know, the club owners didn't know what was going on. They got scared. I had to explain to them the kids they're having fun, basically. Fun.
They're like, "What are these kids doing?"
Yeah. It could be dangerous in those mosh pits and stuff like that. And then the band didn't want anybody getting on stage, so we had to have good, strong barriers and security in the barriers to push people off to make sure they didn't get on stage, stuff like that. There's times that these clubs got these crappy barriers and they were like collapsing and stuff. It's got dangerous there for a while.
I mean, so probably it was the Ramones they're probably the band to start mosh pits, right?
Well, yeah,
We started with the Ramones. I mean, right? I mean, who else would we start with?
Along with those groups that are in the time period, the earlier punk groups started all that stuff too. Yeah.
Now, who was the other? Who was the other group that kind of? I was reading another book. What was that band? Kind of that glam band in the 80s. What was the Lords of the New Church?
I'm not sure with that.
Okay. All right. Well, like you said, there was another band that talked about Joey Ramone, just an interesting guy. And they were another kind of influential band.
Dead Boys.
The Dead Boys. Who was the singer for the Dead Boys?
Steve Vader.
Right.
And Cheetah Chrome. I think Cheetah Chrome was in another group called maybe the Lords of the Church or something.
Now, did you know those guys?
Yeah, sure, because they all hung out at CBGB's and Hilly managed them. You know that, right?
Okay. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. They were big Ramones fans and they hung around CBGB's a lot. And they managed them. We first saw them in Cleveland. They were kids. And the thing I do remember is the Ramones played and they were hanging around. And then after the show, we get on the highway. We're driving 60 miles an hour. This car pulls up. Steve Bader climbs up on the roof and moons the band. We're going 60 miles an hour down the highway. And he gets on and moons the band from the top of the car. And that I remember. He was a crazy guy.
Now, he passed away, right?
Yes.
in Paris somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Cheetah's still around doing stuff. Cheetah Chrome.
So they came out after the Ramones, right?
Yes,
That boys
they were
got it.
influenced by the Ramones. As I said, we played Cleveland, and they were kids, and they saw the band, and they were influenced by them.
Now the whole so do you ever the East Village scene, right? I mean, when you think of CBGBs and the East Village in New York, you can't help not to think of the Ramones, the punk scene. That's pretty much been whitewashed today, right?
Yeah, it's another world down there. It's Yuppieville and stuff. John Varvatos bought the store and bought CBGB's, and it's a high class, extremely expensive clothing store. Like t-shirts are like $80, $90 for a t-shirt or something like that. He kept the inside. He gutted the inside out and kept some of the. If you go there, you can see some. He's a big music fan, so some stuff left over from the original walls and stuff from CBGB's down there. But the whole neighborhood, yeah, it's totally changed. It's like NYU bought a lot of dorms down there. And, it's another world now. High class restaurants. When we were down there, it was the Bowery's a dump. It was bums running around, Salvation Army. You didn't want to, it wasn't a pleasant place to be around, basically. That's why all these artists gravitated to that area at the time, because it was cheap. You could live down there cheaply, and it was another world back then. It was dangerous. The Alphabet City, ABC's. You didn't want to go down there. Now it's like East Village is incredible. Really nice.
Do you like it? Do you like it better?
I'd like to live down there now. It's too expensive now. No, but that I was working down there basically, so I dealt with the dangers of getting in and out of there. So
I just miss the culture, I would say. I mean, I'm all in for improvement, but there's something to be said when something replaces art and culture and vibe. And I think that's happened a lot. I think in this country, I went down to Venice Beach in California not too long ago, and like the whole vibe is gone. I mean, like you had all these tech companies buy buildings, and it's like, where can artists go today? Like, is there any place they can go to get inspired outside of their bedrooms on like opening up social media? Like, where can they go to get inspired?
it's not very inspired. It's like, where can you go to afford to be there and do your thing? Pursue your art, music, or
Yeah,
being an artist. Back then, the East Village was, there's a lot of buildings that are falling apart. You can get in there cheap and do your thing back then. Now it's kind of moving. It went to Williamsburg, then Greenpoint, and now Astoria. It kind of moves around a bit where, it's a little more affordable for people to come in and rent and have a space where you can maybe rehearse a band or do art.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm always thinking like, where can you go to get inspired? Where can you find that by? But yeah, I mean, technology obviously has taken the place of so many things today. Well, listen, Monte A, Melnick. I mean, this was I loved having this discussion, and I mean, I just the fact that I mean, it's just so cool. It's so amazing because when I'm talking to you, I feel like I'm reliving like the Ramones history. Like I feel like you are a Ramone.
Well, I don't like to say that seriously. I mean, I
I
work.
get that. I get that. But you know what I'm saying? Like not.
Yeah. I was there long enough. The only other person that was there as long as me was Arturo Vega. He was like huge influence. He designed the logo, and he was there from the beginning also. And if he was still around, it was myself and Arturo were there from the beginning to end. And unfortunately, he passed away a number of years ago. But he could be another Ramone, basically. I mean, that logo alone, it's incredible. He was a great lighting director. terrific artist and stuff like that. Speaking of artists, the cover of my book was done by John Holmstrom.
Oh, wow. The fame. Oh, yeah, of course.
From Punk magazine. So what I was trying to come up with, basically, writing the book.
Sure.
What to put on the cover, because there were 8 different Ramones over the years,
Right.
So, I didn't want to put different pictures of 8 photos of them up there. So I said, what's a good thing to do with like a cartoon and have John Holmstrom do the cover? And he threw me in there with all the 8 Ramones in the van there. We're driving out of this city, CBGBs and the Pinheads following them. And if you look on the bottom here, there's a sign, 2,263 miles to go. You know what that means, right?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, that was a little thing I put in there. That's how many shows they actually played over the years, and I list them all in the back of the book. If you look, Johnny's wearing a Yankees T-shirt, and Joey's reading a Punk magazine and Yoo-Hoo stuff and things flying off. They did like Yoo-Hoo, by the way. They had it on the lighter.
Wow.
So there's bottles of Yoo-Hoo flying off the van. So that was nice that he did the cover for me.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And like I said, that book is incredible. I mean, there's a lot of chapters, but I think anyone that wants to truly know kind of like the life the Ramones lived, I mean, again, it pretty much goes through everything. I really liked Halfway to Sanity, Inside the Machine, The Crew, The Stage Show. That's what I liked about it. I like the fact that even the Crew, they were kind of had the same personalities as the band. It was like a one big kind of family, right?
Yeah. That's what happens when you tour with the Crew. Everybody's a family, basically, because you're together enough, you're hanging out enough.
I mean, Road to Ruin, Girls Love and Trouble. I mean, typical girls, kind of can be the downfall of a band. The Rare Videos, Press Management, and and End of the Century, the breakup, the aftermath, the end, and that's kind of how I want to leave it. I mean,
yeah,
they rocked hard, and fast, and they kind of left with no big, as you said, no big goodbyes, no birthday cake. Everyone went their separate ways. No one even shook hands. But hey, we changed the world. We were a band ahead of our time. We're rock and roll Hall of Famers. We did it.
Yes, I'm happy to be part of that.
Part of rock and roll history. Part of a movement. Which, let me guess, there's no way you planned that out. This just all happened without you knowing, right?
It's not knowing. It's just you're working, and you don't say, "Hey, this is the rock and roll history going on."
Right.
You just want to get to the next city and make sure everything goes right.
You're just working, and it just kind of happened. It just you kind of fell into it.
Yeah, if you're doing your job well, things happen.
That's what I believe. You work hard and things happen. Well, all right, Monte A, Melnick. Again, it was a pleasure. And
thank you, Dean, for having me.
Thank you for sharing the stories. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and part of the Ramone history. Thank you.
Gabba gabba hey.